This is Harriet Grayson, your host and producer for Community Culture Showcase. Well, it's just about the close of the year, and we've had so many wonderful guests and so many wonderful things to see on my program. And if you ever want to see repeats of some of our shows, just go to YouTube, Community Culture Showcase, Harriet Grayson, and pick up one of your favorite shows. But I would be not a very good host if I didn't have a great conclusion for this year. So to high cap my wonderful year and my many, many wonderful guests, I am really fortunate to have Malcolm Davidson with me today. And Malcolm is a composer, and I love composers. I love musicals. So I think you're going to have a lot of fun with Malcolm and me today. So welcome, Malcolm.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Harriet. How are you?
Wonderful. So
Excellent.
Now tell us a little bit, since I'm of a minor musical career, tell us a little bit about your kind of getting into being a composer.
Well, I'm a technologist by training, and a number of years ago in the 90s, I'd started writing poetry because I had a great deal of interest in English, coming from England, and I began writing poetry, and then one day somebody wondered if I would like to write a song, and I wrote a song, and it was very well received. I wrote 2 songs, and they were performed down in New York State. And at the time I was working for a large corporation in New York City, and I became aware of some of the challenges in the socio-economic construct of the US, and I felt frustrated, and what better way to express those frustrations than through song and dance. And so from those observations, a musical began to form in my mind.
Wow, that's interesting. Now, prior to that, did you have a musical background? Did you study music at all, or?
Can you see me as an angelic little choir boy?
Maybe. Don't the English have lots of those choir boys?
Yes, well, I might look like a choir boy on the outside, but there's a little bit of devil in me on the inside.
Okay, all right. But I'm curious about, so it started out as poetry, I can understand that completely.
Yes.
And you set it to music. Did you then set it to music?
For me, the way the creative process works is the story began to evolve first. Mm-hmm. So the characters began to speak through me.
Yeah.
And as I was writing the song, the music came with the words. So I'd start writing a song, and there would be a tune that would come out of my brain with the words.
Interesting. So you didn't have like musical notation where you actually know. Interesting. Okay.
No, and in fact, one of the songs later on, you will have a prime example of how that worked. Mm-hmm. So let me talk about the impetus for the musical, for the grand arc of the story.
Okay, for the book.
For the book,
yes.
Yeah. Because the songs are a small part of the book, of the journey.
Okay.
I grew up in England and came to America when I was 30. I've been here over 35 years now. And I've seen an imbalance. And we've lived for many centuries, in fact, in a patriarchy where the power and control is in the hands of a very few people. We talk about the 1% mm-hmm. versus the 99%.
Yes, we do.
And as I was waiting to come in here today, I was thinking about Wall Street. Mm-hmm. And I suddenly realized how appropriate there is a wall between the people that control the companies that are on the stock market versus the people who do all the work at the bottom of the socio-economic pyramid.
Right.
And this imbalance is, for me, is something that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
And I decided to address it through a musical.
That's wonderful.
So we start out in the musical, we have the archetypal CEO bully who's yelling and screaming at his staff to work, and we can hear a good example of this in scene 1 of Act 1,
okay.
where we have the boss singing "This is my company." So if we play the first song.
Okay, let's hear the first song.
This is my company. This is my place. Do what I tell you. or I'll be in your face. I am the boss, and I'll have it my way. I have the power. Just do what I say.
So the scene is set
Right.
for the bully CEO yelling at his staff.
Right.
And one of the main themes of the musical, and by the way, it's a comedy. It's a comedy about corporate corruption.
Okay.
Although one sometimes wonders whether corruption is funny at all. But I wanted to make it comedic.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
The whole storyline is about connection. It's about relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in the business world today where we see many adversarial relationships where people are being exploited by the people at the top or exploiting the people at the bottom.
Sure.
So I wanted to create this imbalance and turn it into a more balanced scenario. So it's not just about the relationship between the boss and the workers. There is a father and son relationship in the story. And if I were to ask you or any of my colleagues, some of the issues that we struggle with today, we have drug problems, and I'm sure you have in your extended family and friends, we have experiences of that. I know people who have heroin addicts in their family. I have myself experienced attempted suicides in extended family. I know people who have had to recover from alcoholism.
Sure.
And there's a lot of work going on today in drug addiction, amelioration activities to minimize drug problems. And as I was thinking about coming in today, I thought about money and how we are addicted to money within the corporate structure. And yet it's a problem that a lot of people don't want to look at. So a lot of the exploitation, there are adversarial effects to that greed and avarice for more money. And the CEO in that song you just heard, he sings, never enough, never enough. And that's how he feels, so he has to want more and more, because deep inside he's empty. And so again, we have to highlight and say, what the idea of the musical is to reach out to people and say there are alternative ways to running a business.
Interesting. Now, of course, you know, this is not strictly an American problem.
I totally agree. It's
universal. Worldwide, we run into the same problem. And you know, I'm a writer, so I do a lot of reading. And so when you read future and science fiction, it often has as a plot line, it is an international corporation that in fact, or a series of them, that actually come to rule the world.
Yes.
And they have a structure and rules that governments never abided by, for good reason. The governments are supposedly the powers of the people, in fact, are a government. So they don't need that kind of rule. So they can have their own rule. So when you read, you know, terrible science fiction about where the state of the humankind is going, it often has, as its villain, something to do with an international corporation.
Yes, of course. So getting back to this idea of the connection between the people and relationships, in the father-son relationship, the son is just getting out of prison where he's been locked up for drugs. He's about 17 and he's getting out. His dad goes to see him. So if we could play the second song, please.
You may not believe in God, my son. Sometimes you have to believe in something to forgive yourself for all the things you've done. Life is crazy, life's tough, and it gets harder each day. I wanna help you, but you won't hear what I say.
So here we we have the father in prison seeing his son before he gets out, and he's pleading with him that there are choices that he can make. But his son is still an angry young man because of things that happened earlier in their lives. And he replies to his father in this tension between the father and the teenage son. Why should I listen to you? Why should I listen to you? And all this bullshit that you're into. You weren't around for me and my mom. You drank too much and then you were gone. So get out of my face and leave me alone. Me and my friends, we just want to get stoned. So you have, excuse me, where he puts the microphone. Oh, it's me singing, not that. So here we have this wonderful relationship describing and showing the tension that exists. And this goes on in families not 1 mile from here, where the parents are struggling, one-parent families, struggling to bring up their children.
Right.
And so I wanted to share that in the musical. And of course, because I was in control of the dialogue in the book.
Absolutely, yes.
It does have a happy ending.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, is the father somehow linked to the corporation? Is he an employee?
He works in the corporation. When he was young, he was an alcoholic. And his wife told him, look, if you don't stop drinking, we're going to leave. And he doesn't stop drinking, right? Because he was an angry young man. And they left, and he went out in an anger one morning when he came back from an all-nighter, and driving around in an angry stupor, he knocked over and killed a young girl. And even describing it brings tears to my eyes, thinking about how parents can lose a child so easily. And so he goes to prison.
Oh, okay.
And then in the second act of the musical, he's describing this scenario to the lady that works in the corporation, the office manager, and he explains to her that I stopped drinking, and he's a recovered alcoholic, and he's trying so hard to reconnect with his son.
I see.
And he has a job working at the company, and so that's one of the storylines that is folded into the story.
So does the company get a couple of plus signs for even hiring an ex-con?
I don't bring that up.
Okay.
But it's certainly in my mind. That's a terrific point. So we'll give JP, the CEO villain, we'll give him a couple of brownie points.
Okay.
For that.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, part of the imbalance as well, we get to the point where often when there are problems in a company, the CEO and the senior executives, they turn around and they point the finger and they always blame somebody else.
Absolutely.
Somebody else's problem. So if we play the next song, please. It's called Point the Finger.
Never think about others when this is bound here yet again we just point the finger. Just grab a loop, you don't give a hoot about the workers who have the work to do. If you're great, it'll sit all day with me. Point the finger. What's the game? Let's find who to play.
And right there, what's the game? Let's find who to blame. Because in the corporate culture, it's always somebody else's fault.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Unless you really get your hands dirty and you get found out, but
That's right.
by a whistleblower.
Yep. Speaking of whistleblowers,
Oh, okay. Yes.
the main character in the musical, it's funny because as I was picking out these pieces of music, it's a lady. She's the office manager.
Okay.
And she's symbolic, and she is the archetypal, what I might call feminine energy, which is energy which both men and women have.
Okay.
Feminine energy, in my vision, is more collaborative. It desires to have connection. It is creative. It is empathetic. and it tries to work together, as opposed to the more masculine energy, which has its place. I'm not trying to knock it down. Is more competitive, more self-directed, more, right, we're going to do this, I want number one, that alpha type. And so I wanted to stress that in the complex world we live in today, which is very technically biased, everywhere we go we have complex technology around us.
We do.
And to manage it and to create it, we need to be much more collaborative.
Okay.
I talked before about relationships, and there's a relationship between a computer that you work with and or the websites you go to, applications that you work with, and we all know that sometimes they are completely non-intuitive, very unfriendly when it comes to user friendliness. And so, again, part of the songs that I wrote, there's a song about software corral, which we don't have time to chat here,
yes.
but it's all about, again, it's all about this interaction between people. So back to the heroine, if you will, Marlene is the office manager. One of her songs is called What Is Right? And she truly asks the question when she's directed to do something illegal. She's struggling, what is right? What is right? Please help me, tell me what to do. And I was thinking about Michael Cohen and Michael Flynn.
Oh, yes.
They did not ask that question, what is right?
At least not early on until he got caught.
But no, you have to ask that question before you get caught. And of course, when you get caught and the IRS come running, we have the next song, which is about somebody's got to pay.
Let's open up and have ourselves a look, cause somebody's got to pay. Somebody's got to pay. Try to falsify, go to jail, why? Somebody's got to pay.
Let me ask you a technical question about just the creation of this musical. So we're hearing some kind of soundtrack.
Yes.
You have gotten someone to help you produce this play?
We did a stage reading back in 2003 in Connecticut, in New Britain.
Oh, and interesting.
At the New Britain Rep.
I see. Okay, so this is based on that reading.
Yes.
At that time, that without sets, just a reading, a piano and music, and that's
there was a piano, a keyboard, some drums, a couple of guitars. So it was a good
yes.
It was terrific, and I made a recording of it, and I've changed a lot of the musical since then.
Oh, I see.
But a lot of the songs have stayed.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
And have you then tried to go ahead and get it produced again?
That's one of the. It's interesting because that's one of the big challenges.
Oh, yes.
Trying to get a musical produced.
Yes, trying to get anything produced.
Yes.
Yes.
What I'm hoping is that people that listen to this and people that I talk to recognize that the issues that I bring up, that I mentioned before, about drug abuse, alcoholism, exploitation in the workforce, corruption, those types of things, which I treat in a humorous way as well as a serious way, that they recognize that there is a connection to the audience, that it will reverberate with the audience. There will be a common theme, some energetic exchange, and people will feel. I think for me the key message is that we are validating the experience of the common man, the common woman.
If you say this was produced in 2003, if anything, the problems have only multiplied dramatically. And in fact, we have a political system that is reflective of the corruption of the private sector.
That is absolutely correct. yes, to say this musical is prescient is an understatement. It's even more highlighted.
Yes,
in here.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. So that last song, for all of us, somebody has to pay, ultimately. Because if you don't make a corporation or a society sustainable with accountability, then eventually reality becomes the accountant, if you will. And whether it's changes in the climate, whether it's a corporation that is cooking the books, ultimately it'll fail. And I want to, again, I'm trying to highlight and give people ideas to say, how do we become more collaborative? How do we learn to work together more effectively?
Is the objective much more a political one, though, perhaps, to get people to be activists in terms of demanding things? You can't always demand things from a corporation, but you can have a movement that says, we're not going to buy their products anymore. And you have that kind of public reaction at some kind of revulsion at whatever activities might be going on.
No, one of my visions is to take the musical to go on the road and go to colleges, some cities like Detroit, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, in Ohio, in various states, to perform the musical on the road and have exchanges with the public after the show to discuss there are alternatives to running a company, to managing people, and to have people leave the show, go to work, and start to connect with people at a deeper level where there's inherent empathy, respect, and appreciation for the hard work that goes on in thousands of companies all over the country. And it's not about getting wealth for the corporation that matters, but it's about developing it's about the people rather than the profits, is the real message of the musical.
So is your goal really, so if I go to, went to Detroit, Michigan and performed at Wayne State, which is right there in town.
Yes.
And a bunch of students, professors, the public showed up. You would then guide them in terms of a mission you see as your role as the composer, to have a mission for them to go forward and do?
And we could discuss, okay, what are the most effective, appropriate ways for managing people, for managing a company? Tell me, is the model Wall Street? Or is the model where we respect people and we help them to do a better job? Do we want to send everything to China and have a journey accelerated to the bottom, where everything is cheap as we can be, but nobody can afford to buy things? One of the things I found this morning was a document, and it identified the 20 highest CEO worker pay ratios in the S&P 500. And the ratio between, I'll give you two examples.
Sure.
Over 4,000 times more than the average worker gets is the CEO's pay. He's getting over 30 million a year from a company.
What's the company?
This one is Mattel.
Mattel, the toy company.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, and McDonald's, the average worker, he earns about $7,000 a year working at McDonald's. That's the median pay, and the CEO gets over 20 million. Now the point is, how many millions do you need to live? And I'm not saying we want to penalize people at the top, but we need to address the imbalance.
So how do we? And maybe this is not the purpose of your musical, but how would you change that imbalance? I mean, is it not through governmental tax policy?
No. It's by developing, and it's brought out in the musical, it's about developing the spiritual side of people where they recognize, I do not need to have all this material wealth to be happy.
So it would be required the CEO and all of those 100 or 150 highest paid to give up some of their money?
Not necessarily, but start to change the construct of how the company is put together and say, we need to give workers to have a minimum pay. We need to maybe change the tax structure to change the socio-economic imbalance. We have in the American sporting world, we have the draft, which recognizes we cannot have strong teams always taking the best players. So they help the weaker players. So you could argue, let's figure out how do we do a draft for corporations and cultures and societies.
Interesting.
Yeah. So moving on with the musical, it's not all business. In the second act, one of the couples, there's a couple who are married. She runs the software department and he runs the hardware department. And it's her birthday and he comes back to work to talk to her. And we have scene 2. The first song is called Underwire Blues.
Works for you, I hope it works for you now. It's my birthday. Wow. It's your birthday. I hope you like what I bought for you, what I got for
So that's the humor part.
Yes, he came back to work with a gift of some underwear for her, and she's under the wire at work. So,
yes, a play on words.
Yes, of course.
Yes. I was thinking underwire. You said underwear. I'm thinking of a bra, which is
with the underwire. Yes,
underwire.
absolutely. But also we talk about, I'm under the wire. I've got so much work to do.
Okay, so it has the double entendre.
Exactly.
Yes,
that's
I
right.
got you.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
Yes, and they have a very interesting experience and the relationship, because she takes care of all the software, and it's a very respectful relationship. And one of the things that I did about 2 years ago, he comes back to work, and he wants to come into work. Nobody's around, so he wants to have a little bit of fun at the office. And I left that in. Mm-hmm. And then I'm thinking about the Me Too movement, and I realized she's busy, she's working. why does it always have to be the guy getting his way? So she basically says to him, stop. Thank you very much for the presents, but we're not going to start making out in the office. I am busy. And he listens and he respects her views, and then he gives her the gift. And I think, again, that is a very positive message to let people know, a lot of young men, old men as well, that a woman has to be in control of her own choices. And one of the songs in the musical was called Choices in the first act.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have how many? What are the players? We have the boss.
You have a boss and his second in command, who's a bit of a sycophant.
Okay.
Frank. Then you have the two young
different couples.
Then we have Marlene, who is the office manager.
Okay.
And then you have the Robert and his son Harry.
Oh, okay.
That Robert is the man who works in shipping.
Right, and the son was the one who was in jail.
He was in jail.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And all the stories are woven together.
Right.
So the CEO gets found out he's cooking the books. He's running 2 sets of books, and he ends up going to prison. He goes to a trial. So the judge asks if anybody has anything to say. And he says, yes, I'd like to talk on my behalf. I've got something to say. I don't think I should be here. So he sings the next song, which is from scene 3 in Act 2.
I'd like to say something in my behalf. Frank, can you hold this for me? I am the very symbol of the lean and mean new management. I push my staff, cajole the staff, who cares about the damagement? I have to work at the desk, I could be selling more and more. I have to fill the orders, now must push the product out the door.
So here he is talking about, he doesn't care, he thinks he's not guilty, he wants to get back to work, he's got to be pushing the product out the door, making more profits.
And this scene is set in a courtroom?
It's in the courtroom.
So he's actually in the jury box? Not the jury box, in the witness box?
He's in the witness box, and there's a jury there, which is the chorus, and they respond to him. It's a very funny song.
Okay, good.
But the judge doesn't have anything of it. They lock him up for a few years.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Is that the sentence that you hear from the judge?
Yes, yes.
I was expecting the whistleblower to testify.
She did early on.
Oh, in the trial?
In the trial, yes.
Okay,
yes.
That was my expectation. Good, I'm glad to see it was met.
Yes. And so he goes to prison. And we don't have time to go through the whole complete story, but the man in shipping, Robert, he has a couple of accidents at work. He drops boxes, and he drops a box of switches on the CEO, and they fire him. He gets fired. Out, you're fired. Which reminds me of somebody else, right?
Yes, don't we know?
And in fact, the CEO, he is a Trumpian character.
Yes.
That's what he does. He doesn't care about people. So Robert gets fired, and he was trying so hard to be a good father to his son, Frank.
Yes.
And he is in despair. And he goes home and he tries to kill himself, to commit suicide. And Frank and his son, Harry, comes home. He'd been out somewhere, and he finds his dad. And he fortunately takes him to hospital, and he's so angry. So he comes into work, and he beats up the guy who fired him, who was told to fire him, beats him up. So he gets picked up by the police.
Yes, yes.
So we've got the CEO in court. We've got Harry in court.
Yes.
But the CEO, he goes down.
Oh,
He's
okay.
down. He gets sent to prison. And the young Harry, the judge lets him out.
Okay.
Because he recognizes, look, he was a young man. He's been
Trying
in
to
prison
defend
before.
his father.
He was worried about his dad, and
Yes.
and the son is very apologetic. And so he gets let out, which is part of the humor and the pathos of the whole storyline, because sometimes it's nice to have the good guys winning.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So JP is in prison, and
This is the CEO.
The CEO is in prison, and he tells Frank, his second in command, he said, "We're going to sell the company. I'm going to close it down. Everybody's gone. I can do what I want from here." So the next song is Closing Down the Plant, from a sample from Act 5 in Scene 2.
I'm closing down the plant. I'm shutting down shop forever.
Closing down the plant, shut no shop forever. The sun will never shine again, regardless of the weather.
I'll sell it if I can, but never to that house ground.
He needs someone to push them hard, he doesn't even know how.
Frank here is my man. I trust him to do my bidding. He's always done whatever I've said.
Especially with the fiddling.
So again, all he cares about is doing whatever he wants. He's in prison, and one of the subsequent stanzas from that song is JP sings, "I want someone like me, a man who knows the business, a pushy, hard-nosed SOB who never thinks of Christmas." Because again, people in business, they never stop to think about the worker down on the shop floor.
Right. Right.
And I wanted to stress that in a humorous way.
Sure. Sure. How many acts is this?
Two acts.
2 acts, and how many scenes in Act 1?
There are 8 scenes in Act 1 and 8 scenes in Act 2.
Okay, and it generally takes what, 2 hours?
It's about 2 hours.
2
Just
hours.
over 2 hours.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of the most poignant songs, which actually wasn't in the first in the stage reading, and I wanted to play that because this sums up my whole approach. As I mentioned before, I'm not a musician, but as I'm writing the song, the tune is with me. So I'd sing it with my poor voice. My wife would hear it, and she would pick up the guitar. She'd figure out some chords.
Okay.
We'd sing it together, or she'd sing it. I'd record that, and then the man who was the musical director for the show,
We'd find the orchestrations.
he would put the orchestrations together.
Okay.
And this song that we're going to play now was not in the stage reading, so this is the original recording that my wife did, and the way it worked, she sang it to me over the phone from Rhode Island. I'm sitting in my office in New York City.
Wow.
I recorded it on a little tape recorder, and then had that ready in case we were going to use it. We didn't use it. And I just thought we could play, because this whole song sums up my approach to Marlene asking the question about, why do you people, the CEO of this world, why don't you stop and think about the life that the average worker has?
Now, this is the woman who is the whistleblower.
Correct.
She's the one who sees the light.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, this is Marlene. So could you play Did You Ever Think?
Do you ever think about the workers? Did you ever think about their rights? If you'd been sweating in the shadows like the back boys do every night. No one gives them an expense account, just hours to work to knock them dead. Toiling away for minimum wage, how are we supposed to get ahead? You've been in the limelight next to JP, I've been in the office all along. But the stage is set, it's my turn now, my career will come on strong. This chance is mine, the chance is mine. This fleeting lady chose to take us all another way. I'm sorry. Your days are spent, it's our turn now. It's me that's gonna make it a new day. With Pete and the gang, and we know we'll do it. Make gold come a caring place. Globcom, sorry. Pride and concern in every product, and JP's ways will be erased. The stage is set, this leading lady is ready to write the words for a new play. Your part is gone, you'll have to go now, so we can have a better way. Your time is up, we've made our choice. We want to begin another day, or something like that.
Yeah, it's a very plaintive cry.
Yes, yes. And you provided the lyrics, so these are all based on really poetry that you've written, which is what many singer-songwriters are all about.
Sure,
yes,
yeah,
they create poetry and then they put it to music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny, as I listened to that, it brought tears to my eyes because I think of the struggles that so many people go through, where they're working every day, they're trying to put food on the table for their families, and people just push them and push them.
Well, we have heard evidence, certainly from federal agencies, from suicide prevention groups, that the rates of drug addiction and suicide are quite high, and they're higher among groups that traditionally have not been as badly affected, and it's people in the Midwest and the South and the West who have felt hollowed out by what has happened economically.
Yes, absolutely correct.
And their desperation, I suspect, is all their exhaustion from trying all kinds of things. They're not on the employment rolls. They've stopped looking for work.
Yep.
And there's false promises, false prophets who come, some who run for office and say, oh, I'm going to bring back the coal industry to West Virginia. Well, the whole world doesn't need coal.
Correct.
Instead of that, the 75,000 people whose lives depend on coal need to be retrained to do something in AI or IT or something complete, and they're all capable of doing this. It's just not done. It's just not done.
Absolutely. So I totally agree with you. And again, part of the work of the musical, the message, is to validate the struggles and say, what can we do by sharing, by collaboration, by talking about it? What can we do to make a difference? And not hollow words, but action.
Right.
So, going back to the storyline, Marlene, she whistleblowed to the IRS.
Okay.
The CEO was put in prison. And she says, why don't we get a loan? I've been running the office for the last few years. We'll get a loan from the bank, and we'll get some contracts, and they have some potential sales coming in, and we'll run the business.
Right.
The two people that run software and hardware, they know the business. They've got good products in the works. Let's go to the bank. So they put a business plan together and they go to the bank. And I'm just going to, they go there, and the bank manager, of course, what he's doing, he's sick and tired of listening to business proposals. So he says, look, this is a highly irregular situation. I'm not really interested. People with these silly dreams. And Marlene said, this proposal isn't about dreams. It's about jobs. It's about people with families. Look, I've been in that office for years. I've watched Pugsley yell and scream at everybody. I want to make a difference. I want to run the business properly. So the bank manager starts singing this song. He says, I'm conservative by nature. That's my style. I do everything so slowly. It takes a while. That's why I'm into banking. It suits me fine. Those numbers make me happy, line by line. I'm conservative by nature. You understand. Appointments by the hour, always planned. Banking is my business week by week. I have no other interests that I seek. And so he's trying to let them know, look, don't try to push me around and expect things. But she's there with Pete, and they respond, and Pete says, have some trust, it's only just, please you must, helping, 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 no more bloody yelping, do what's right, it's in your might, helping, helping, helping. And so he finally takes the business plan and he goes to think about it. Now you can imagine in my hand what happens. Of course they get the business, they get the loan.
Well,
they
you have
need.
to have a positive outlook. Did
Yes.
you not say that?
Yes, they get the loan, and the stipulation, and it's funny because the stipulation is that you have to get the order from Disney. Because they put an order in to get to redo, send some fiber optic and network equipment to Epcot Center down in Orlando.
Okay.
And they got another order from AT&T, and the stipulation was we have to get the Disney order. And I remember when we did the show, it's all set up, and they're talking about, will the order come through? Well, they said they'd call today, and then the phone rings. And then one of the guys says, come on, Mickey Mouse, step up to the plate. We need a home run. So this girl, she's waiting, and she gets a pen. Yes, DD 2675, thank you. And she looks down. We got the order! And the whole place, all the chorus, the backup singers, everybody in the place was screaming and yelling, and they were so happy. And you literally felt, you could feel in the whole auditorium the relief. And they're just acting, and yet the whole 90 minutes of frustration and knowing, okay, this is what we're trying to do. We're reaching this peak of starting to run a business properly. And suddenly, just in that one little bit,
Right.
the whole, it was encapsulated in that one piece of acting where she said, we got the order.
And you chose Disney because of its iconic nature, its Americana?
Its iconic nature.
Okay.
And also the fact that they need a lot of networking equipment. They're a very complicated, and the whole musical is set around technology.
The being able to provide tech, that's the nature of this company.
Yes, they make
Yes.
switches, modems, technology, software, and so forth. Yeah. So the whole idea was going back to what I'd said earlier. It's about independent thinking today, and about independent thinking, but the ability to work together in a collaborative way.
Right.
Because without that, we will not survive.
Was the possibility that the new company could emerge as even employee-owned or a cooperative?
It probably could, and that is up to Marlene, but she is a collaborative person by definition. Again, it's that feminine energy that it doesn't have to just reside in females.
Right.
In the same way that male energy does not have to
Right.
reside in me.
You don't have to be a man to be a brute.
That's exactly, yes. And what happens in corporations, a lot of females go up the corporate ladder, and they
Right.
think the way to be successful is to
Right.
be one of the boys.
Right, so they emanate the wrong kinds of personality
Correct.
traits.
In the 1980s, when Ronald Reagan was president, he had a budget director called David Stockman.
Oh, yes.
And the term at that time, they talked about trickle-down economics. And I remember a few years after that thinking, okay, let's look at what trickles up. And you find it's greed, avarice, lack of empathy, emptiness, materialism. Those are all the things that trickle up to the top. The ability to tell lies, lack of integrity. And when you come down what trickles down, what's at the bottom. How would you feel if you had a plumber or an electrician that came over, did a terrible job and told you everything's fine? Just plug it in, it'll work. Turn the tap on, everything's okay. Turn the tap on and water's going everywhere. Well, you cannot have a plumber or a tradesman that doesn't have integrity. Because they could not do their job.
Right.
A software programmer, how can they do their job if they're not honest, have integrity, understand about accountability, understand about feedback, understand about proper analysis and synthesis, etc.? It would be impossible. And yet we have corporations that are run by people that have none of those skills.
Right.
And they are those. The antithesis of what we value is highlighted in the behavior of the CEO.
So tell me, I mean, as the composer and as the author of the book, do you have a sense that someone who becomes a CEO is inherently this kind of evil person, or is it someone who rose through the ranks and then became tainted as they, in your description, as they went up and up? That's when the greed and the avarice and the discontent and his disregard to the workers, is that something that they learned on their way up? Or is it something that people just are, that's their personalities, and then they just elevate themselves to that position?
This comes under the heading of it's not a black and white situation. We can have the discussion about, is it nature or nurture? It's a bit of both.
Okay.
There are people who have certain ideals, who, let's say, want to go to Washington and make changes. They feel they can do something, and they get influenced adversely by the system.
Right.
There is a system in place which tends to focus on the short term. Whether it's profits for a company,
right.
In politics, it is the lobbyist and the corporations that mandate how a politician will make decisions.
Right.
It is not the people that voted him in or her, because we have too much money in the system.
Right.
We need to take money out of the system, and so politicians will only be held accountable by the voters of their district, and what is right for the country, what is right for the state, what is right for the people at a social and a cultural level. However, decisions get made by politicians for what is right for them and their cronies and the corporations.
Well, it's all about money, and of course the Supreme Court in recent years has okayed that. I mean,
yes.
There's unlimited funds that pour into elections, and of course that has to have some tainting of their actual beliefs. Yeah. We would hope, again, this is yours is a hopeful enterprise. We would hope that some of the change that's happening in the country right now as a result of the election last month might bring new faces in who are not so beholden to the lobbyists and the corporate sponsors and certain other kinds of groups that are out there, that they would be more beholden to their constituents.
Correct.
Well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
You know, time will tell. I mean, we have, as a world, gone through a series of these roller coasters since industrialization in the 1700s. Yep. But we want to wind up the show.
Okay.
And to do that, you have a finale piece that you would like to play. Do you want to introduce it?
I actually want to just finish up with one quick segment, and then we can put on the finale piece. The beginning of the show, JP is singing, "This is my company, this is my place. Do what I tell you or I'll yell in your face. I am the boss and I'll have it my way. I have the power, just do what I say." Now at the end of the show, Marlene, who represents my ideal of how we manage corporate...
The new CEO.
This is our place. We'll do what is right, and we'll do it with grace.
Change the pronoun from I to we.
That's right, and it's all about we. And it's about connections. Connections. I want to talk about connections, not rejections. And that's how it goes. So yes, we can wrap up by playing the piece, which is a reprise of Somebody's Got to Pay, because I think it's important that people understand that ultimately we will pay whether we like it or not.
One way or the other.
One way or the other, correct.
Right. So let's hear the last. Is this actually the finale of the...
No, this is the finale of Act 1.
Okay, this is the finale of Act 1.
When the IRS come to visit.
Oh, okay.
This is a crime, Mr. Huxley, and we intend to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law.
Think you're gonna get over on us?
Think again! Think again! I'm interested in the second little book. Let's open up and have ourselves a look, cause somebody's got to pay. Somebody's got to pay. Try to falsify, go to jail. Why? Why? Somebody's got to pay. I want your money. I'm doing the counting. I want your money. Money? It's an Internal Revenue Service audit. Internal Revenue Service audit?
Get the message. It's gonna be jail time.
You take those books now. But it isn't my crime. I want your money. I want your money. Now somebody's got to pay. Somebody's got to pay. Try to falsify, go to jail. Why? Why? Somebody's got to pay. Come with us now to the loose now.
Sing.
Judge we have in mind, she gives good time. So if there's guilt to find, you'll pay for the crime. You better come with us for questioning. I want to know a lot more about this operation.
Now look here. I have a business to run. There must be some sort of mistake. We can just talk it out. I have work to do.
You should have thought about that before. Come with us now, sir.
And Miss Smith, you'd better come too.
Me?
We must find out all the details.
Okay, look, I'm sure I can straighten this out. Frank? Yes. Take charge while I'm gone. She kept the books for me. I never knew all the details. Marlene ran the office. What happened, JP? Where are you going? It's the IRS. I have to deal with the IRS.
That's right you do, cause somebody's got to pay. Somebody's got to pay. Try to falsify and go to jail. Why?
Why?
Somebody's got to pay. Somebody's got to pay. Try to falsify and go to jail. Why? Somebody's got to pay.
Well, I want to thank you, Malcolm, for sharing with us this wonderful musical, which we hope will find a performance space where we can go and see it in live, in person. Wonderful idea, certainly written in 2003, couldn't be more appropriate as we end out 2018 and go into the next year. Maybe some of that optimism about change.
Yes.
we might actually see.
Great. Well, Harriet, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. So I want to thank all of my audience. This is Harriet Grayson, your host and producer for Community Culture Showcase. We hope you've had a wonderful 2018. We look forward to a wonderful 2019. Keep safe, keep happy, and I'll see you in the new year.